Why what I'm saying matters. My name is Yessenia Funes. I've been covering issues of environmental justice and climate justice for over 10 years. For those who aren't familiar, environmental and climate justice focus specifically on the ways that the climate crisis and ecological crises affect the most marginalized and the most oppressed. I've only been freelancing for 2 years. Most of my career has been spent on staff. My first job out of college was as an editor at Yes Magazine, RIP, they're no longer publishing. I was there for a year before I left to go write for Color Lines, which is a now largely defunct racial justice news site with a national lens. I was the climate justice reporter there. I spent a year there before going on to work for Gizmodo. They had launched a new environmental vertical called Earther, and I was among the staff that they brought on to launch the news site. And part of what I did there was cover climate science, energy policy news, the Trump administration, Trump, 1.0, and all things frontline activism. That was always at the heart of a lot of my reporting. And I was there for about 3 years. We got bought by private equity, and it really ruined the job that I loved so much. It was probably the best job I ever had. And then private equity ruined it, as they ruin all good things. And then I went on to work for Atmos, which is an independent climate and culture magazine. Most people are familiar with us through our Instagram account. I spent 3 years on staff there as their climate editor, went on to become the climate director, where I published bi-weekly newsletter on all things environmental justice, and spent about 2 years there. And I decided to leave. I quit that job because I felt that it wasn't satisfying a lot of what I wanted to do. The work that I was doing there involved a lot of commissioning and editing, which are really important skills. And I love all the editors that I work with now, but I really wanted to focus on my writing. And I felt that I wasn't given the space, the time, and the editing to become a better writer. And for the writers in the room, a good editor makes all the difference in the type of writer you become. And I just wasn't getting that there. And so I decided to leave. And I entered the freelance world. It sort of happened serendipitously. I woke up one day and I was like, I really don't like working here anymore. And maybe I'll just quit my job. And this was at the time of, I think the Renaissance album had just came out by Beyonce. And I was like, you know what, I'm a listen art girl and I'm gonna quit my job. But that is all to say, the first step is to really ask yourself if this is something you really wanna do. And I say this half jokingly, but it's a big step, I think, to decide I'm gonna become a full-time freelancer, especially for someone like myself who was very comfortable in a full-time job. I had a spree of full-time employment, and I took a leap of faith really to decide for myself that I wanted to become a freelancer. And so the first step in launching your freelance business is to really think deeply about whether this is right for you. I had a lot of privilege, to be frank, in the sense that I had been in the industry already for almost 10 years at that point. Before I became a freelancer, I was already receiving a lot of editors and assignments wanting to work with me. I had already built a really, hefty portfolio and reputation for the work that I was doing. And so I felt really confident and comfortable that I could do it because I'm already getting editors who want to work with me, and I'm not even full-time freelance. So that gave me the confidence I needed to decide I could do this for myself. But that's not going to be the situation for everyone, right? Especially for early career folks. It's, I think, a lot more tumultuous to decide that you want to become a full-time freelancer. And it requires a lot of discipline. I think that when you're working in a newsroom, there's structure and there's routine, and you have to log on at a certain time or you're going to get in trouble, and you have to log off at a certain time, although that's not true. Most newsrooms and people I know who work in newsrooms work way too much.
No one makes you log off.
That's true. No one makes you log off unless there's a cool event that everyone's running to after work, like happy hour or something. But there's a lot more structure to being in a newsroom, a lot more. So when you're on your own, you need a lot more discipline to wake up to start your day at whatever time you want to start it at. That being said, you also have a lot more freedom, right? You get to decide what your workday looks like. I go to yoga sometimes in the middle of the workday, and I don't need to answer to anyone. I don't have a boss to report to. I have clients, which is really empowering to know that I get to decide whether I want to work with this person or not. But it's something that you have to really think deeply about. So that's step one. And then step two is legitimizing your business. I don't think that, I don't know if the SHIRT program does this, but like most journalists, I don't think go into freelance world thinking that they're becoming small business owners, but that is essentially what you're becoming. You're becoming a small business owner, and you need to think like a business owner in order to be successful at it. And unfortunately, most of us don't have the training or the knowledge or the expertise to do that well. I certainly did not. But now looking back, I recognize how important and crucial it is to have, certain steps and plans cemented before you make that leap. And I did know enough to do, I think, what I needed to do. And it's simple things, which, simple I say now, but it can be kind of daunting if you're not familiar with the process. So for instance, deciding on a business name, right? That could be anything you want. I decided that my business would be called Possibilities Productions because my newsletter is called Possibilities. I love the fact that that kind of like opens a door to all types of things. If I want to like work on film or if I wanted to work on podcasts or something in the future, like it's very open and vague. Productions kind of can mean many things. And once you decide on a name, you have to form an LLC. Like these really boring, mundane tasks that shield you as a reporter, because the work that we do is quite sensitive, especially in this political climate. I think it's really, really important to formalize and legitimize your business as an independent contractor. I have here purchasing business insurance. When I first launched my business, I did not purchase business insurance. I quit my job 2 years ago, 2023. And I only purchased business insurance this year. And now it's something that I would urge anyone who's becoming a freelancer to have, because the reality is if a big player decides to sue you, as we're seeing, for instance, the Trump administration doing to many newsrooms, as an independent writer, most of the agreements that we sign with our clients have indemnity clauses. So if someone decides to sue us for our reporting, we're on our own. And so if you don't have business insurance, how are you going to pay for the lawyers to deal with the legal fallout of a story that you're working on? And an LLC is really important in shielding you as well for financial reasons. Let's say you get a credit card under your business account and things don't go well and you default or something. Your bankruptcy is something that we don't want to think about, but we should be prepared to deal with. And an LLC protects you so that your own personal assets aren't at risk. It's your business assets that are at risk. So it's important to separate your personal assets from your business assets, even though it's really one and the same for a lot of us, but having some separation there and formal legal protections is really, really important. I think especially right now in the political climate, the way that journalists are being targeted by the federal government, we need to be prepared for that. Business accounts. This is super boring stuff, and I'm so sorry that I have to talk about this with you, but it's really, really important. Taxes. I do my taxes every quarter. I have my CPA that I've been working with since before I decided to become a freelancer, because I was already getting some freelance work, and so I needed someone to help me sort through my income. And a business account is really important in helping you organize your finances. So for instance, when I am billing my clients and sending my invoices, all the income comes into my specific business account. That way, I'm keeping track of how much money I'm making. If there are expenses, whether it's like a new subscription or a subscription to, the host for my website, that comes out of my business account, and then I'm able to also better monitor the expenses. Because during tax season, you want to have enough expenses so that you're not paying so much money in taxes. When you're getting a check like every week or every 2 weeks, you don't really realize how much money is going toward taxes. It's something that it's like out of sight, out of mind. You just look at your pay stub and you're like, cool, I have my money. But during tax season, those expenses really make a difference in whether you're paying, $20,000 or like $10,000 in taxes. And in my business account, I have like a special sub account where I put, 40% of every paycheck I get goes in there for taxes. I live in New York, and my CPA is like, you should just put away 40% to be safe, because I was doing 30% before and it was not enough. So these are really important steps to take. And a budget. This is probably where I still lack some some skills in preparing my own budgets. I did all of this pretty much before I launched my business. I want to just to say that because when I quit my job, I gave myself a month before I actually dove into taking on assignments and really like committing myself to freelancing to do pretty much all of this. The budget's the only one that and the business insurance, which I just got this year. The budget is where I think could have been more tactful in. Trying to assess not only what are my personal expenses for the month that I need to make sure I'm making enough money to cover, but also what are my business expenses. And maybe should I be making, including more business expenses so that at the end of the tax year, I'm not scrambling to look for things in my credit card statements, figuring out, what I can use. Even things like meals and, business meetings, coffees with colleagues. These are all things that you should factor into your budget so that you're on top of gathering the expenses you need for the tax season. So once you get the business stuff out of the way and sort of build that foundation for what your business will look like, the legal part of the business and the financial part of the business, you have to also think deeply about the editorial workflow, which really works hand in hand with the business side of things. This includes things like, what are my rates going to be? How much money do I need to charge my clients in order to meet the budget that I've created for myself? What is my hourly rate versus my per word rate? What's the lowest that I'll go for an assignment that comes in? What do you really need to be shooting for to meet those budget requirements that you've outlined for yourself? And remember, the budget should always be looking at your actual expenses, personal, like your rent, your bills, your car payment, your house payment, whatever it may be. You need to be really diligent in ensuring that you're not taking on work that is going to make it harder for you to make the money that you need to make. It's like this. It's definitely a tension point. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But sticking to your guns when it comes to your rates and really looking at them before you start, pitching and talking to editors is extremely helpful. And before you even start pitching and writing and embarking on your freelance career, you need to start thinking about your clients. Who are they going to be ahead of time? Like right now, as you all are students, thinking ahead. What publications do I want to write for? Are there any colleagues or professors or peers who are already working somewhere that could perhaps provide opportunities in their workplace or connect me with folks elsewhere? Before, when I quit my job, I sent a mass email to all my former colleagues, even some sources, and just let them know hey, I'm available for work. I quit my job and I'm looking for freelance opportunities. Please keep me in mind. And work came in that way. It wasn't a ton of work and it wasn't some of my more long-term clients, but it helps you kind of get your foot in the door. Figuring out, what are the listservs and the newsletters where people are regularly sharing freelance opportunities and job opportunities. I think that's especially important if you don't yet have relationships with folks in the industry. And I know I'm not familiar with too many newsletters, but I know there is a lot of newsletters out there that are dedicated to this. And there's a Slack group I know for journalists of color that's really dedicated to this, called the Crayola Slack group, JOC Slack group. But trying to figure out, what are those spaces that you can turn to look for work and editors and find those relationships if you don't already have them in your orbit. And lastly, is there non-journalism work that excites you, that interests you, that can help supplement the journalism? Because the reality is it's really hard to make a living as a journalist, especially as a freelancing journalist. For instance, I work with a lot of foundations and philanthropy to help fill in the gaps when I want to do a story that perhaps doesn't pay me as much as it should, but I'm really excited to do. Or, we were talking earlier about grants, trying to figure out what grant opportunities and other financial opportunities exist to help support the work that you want to do that help cover some of your income requirements. And lastly, you have to figure out your pace. And I think this is the challenge that a lot of folks are not always prepared for with self-employment and freelancing is you have to really have a sense of yourself. You have to be really self-aware and recognize your own limitations. How long do you take to report and write a story? Do you need a couple of days to write? Do you need, is like one day enough time? What are the parameters of the timelines in which you operate? Like, what are the rhythms and the flows for your work pace? Are you happy? Are you the kind of person who likes to work at night? Like, are you more productive in the evenings versus the mornings? Are you happy to do longer days sometimes? You know, these are the kind of questions you have to ask yourself so that you can determine how much work you're going to take at a time without overwhelming and overburdening yourself. Because as someone who used to be an editor and would hire freelancers and contributors, the worst thing you can do is to do a bad job. I've had writers who would miss deadlines or get me like sloppy copy, and I would never work with them again. Like, it just wasn't worth it to me. Editors have limited budget. We have so many pitches that want to work with, so many writers who want to work with us. And if you stretch yourself too thin, then you're more likely to do a bad job. And as a business owner, like, your reputation is everything, really. So really getting a sense of what your pace is so that you can do good work that you're proud of. And I wanted to just share with y'all some tools that I use as a freelancer, which not only help with my like monthly and annual expenses that I need to cover for my taxes, but also just help keep me organized. I use QuickBooks, which is great for like sending out invoices and keeping track of how much money I might owe every quarter. LegalZoom and Northwest Registered Agent is what I use to help set up my LLC. There's like so much paperwork that goes into setting up an LLC, especially in New York State. You have to like have something in a newspaper and all this like weird, I still don't understand it, but I just hired them to do it for me and figure it out for me because I could not for the life of me figure it out myself. Airtable is my favorite program. That's what I use to just like keep all my things organized. I have all these different views. It's similar to other programs like Notion or Monday. I don't know what else is there. There's so many different programs that do this. It doesn't have to be Airtable. It's just what I'm used to using. And there are like lower cost options available as well. This one just gives me like color coded options, which as a visual learner, I really enjoy. Proton is what I use for my email and my VPN and my like cloud drive, which I really recommend, especially right now with security concerns. I did a story recently on like these indigenous researchers who are trying to get all their data out of the US because they just don't feel safe anymore, even using like Google Drive, right? And so I'm trying to like migrate more and more of my things out of US-based tech companies, and Proton is based, I think, in like Switzerland or Sweden. And security is like one of their main focuses. Bluevine is the business banking, it's my business bank, and they're great. I find them very useful and helpful and very easy to use. And Squarespace, Grammarly, AP Stylebook, I'm sure you all are familiar with those already. And so here are just some views just for folks who aren't familiar with Airtable. I figured it would just be helpful to see what it looks like. This is my most used view where I can look at all my assignments. I can organize it based on the outlets. I get to see how much money I'm getting paid for it, what status is in. Am I awaiting payment? Has it been paid? And it all also funnels into like a separate tab that gives me a sense of how much money I can expect to make that year with all that, all the entries. And then my second most common view is my deadlines calendar, which I need to keep me like on task and help me prioritize my time. So if a deadline is 2 weeks from now versus a month from now, I'm going to focus on the one that's coming up sooner. But yeah, as you all could see, a lot of these programs are super expensive. It's almost $2,000 in annual costs, and that's not even including things like news subscriptions, contractors, I hired a contractor for my logo and for my website design, business meetings with sources or business meetings with editors, your retirement. If you're not working for a company, you're the only one contributing to your retirement. You don't have a 401k, office supplies, and healthcare is the biggest one. It's actually, I think, one of the biggest sources of reducing your tax costs every year. But it's also super expensive. This is the first year that I had to forego buying my own healthcare because I just could not afford it. I made too much money last year, and they were trying to charge me like $300 a month for healthcare. So I said, F that. I'm just going to hope for the best. So much of America lives this way, unfortunately. But this is the realities, right, of being a freelancer. And a lot of the people I know who are doing it comfortably are married and like have a partner to lean on, or have generational wealth and are much more comfortable with the instability of it. I'm making do, but there's still things that give me a lot of stress, specifically being uninsured. None of this is to deter y'all and to scare y'all, but I think it's important to have a real sense of the work. Like, I'm super fulfilled, and I don't want to work for someone again, but I'm also like very open to taking a job these days given the healthcare loss. So it's a balance of figuring out, you know, what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and what risks you're willing to take for your career, you know, and what makes you happy. Freelancing makes me very, very happy. And I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you so much, Yessenia.